Michelle had been dreaming for 2 years about being able to relax her buns, expose them to the sun, and take a break. But she somehow could never manage to save up enough money for a vacation. Just when it seemed like the sea was within reach on the horizon, something would happen and all her savings would disappear down the drain. Either a pipe would burst and they'd have to urgently remodel the kitchen, or the washing machine would break down. At the same time, they also decided to remodel the bathroom. Then they were moving the mother-in-law in and furnishing her room and buying furniture, and now Michelle said enough, let's go to the sea. Brian was also ready for a break after dealing with all these unexpected issues alongside his wife, and he too was tired. They had the necessary amount for a decent vacation, but then it turned out that the mother-in-law would be going with them. She also needed a change of scenery, her husband said. Michelle thought, a break from what? The mother-in-law had moved in with them 7 months ago. They set everything up for her, fed her, and didn't overburden her with anything. She did as she pleased without working. But now she also wanted to go to the sea. Michelle wasn't a monster. She didn't mind letting her come off coursey. She would have liked to vacation alone with her husband. But if that's how it is, then no big deal. However, it turned out that Linda's vacation would be at their expense. They immediately decided that a hotel would be too expensive for 3 people and found a room in a guest house to share. They also had to abandon eating in cafes, at least not every day. There was everything you needed there to cook in the shared kitchen. This isn't what Michelle had dreamed of, but at least she didn't need to go to work and could go to the sea every day. She didn't think cooking would stress her out because she expected they would somehow split the responsibilities. But the mother-in-law piled all the domestic chores on the daughter-in-law's shoulders, while she herself, as is proper, fully relaxed and didn't do anything. Michelle made breakfast, while Linda comfortably slept in and crawled out when everything was ready. Michelle also made lunch and dinner, while the 56-year-old mother-in-law sunbathed as if it didn't concern her. Michelle couldn't take it anymore. It infuriated her that her husband wanted to save money, and she was the one who had to take the fall. He decided that his wife should serve both him and his mother, and she spoke her mind. "Actually, I came here to relax," she said, "but just this once I can make food for you." Even the mother-in-law didn't miss that and stared at her daughter-in-law in surprise. "You did say the room was too expensive," Michelle said, turning to her mother-in-law. "On my way to the beach, I saw a sign that a shed was for rent really cheap. It would be just right for you." Both her husband and mother-in-law were shocked by this response. While they were still digesting what Michelle said, she went to the room. Brian and his mom didn't believe until the last moment that Michelle had told them off, thinking she had overheated in the sun and would cool down and everything would be normal again. She came to the room, quickly gathered her husband's and mother-in-law's belongings, and had their suitcases waiting outside the door by the time they returned. She didn't open the door when they knocked, saying she was the one who paid for the room and that since her mother-in-law had money, she could rent something for herself and her son. While they argued, the neighbors came and threatened to call the police. Brian and his mom had no choice but to leave. Of course, this was all unpleasant for Michelle, but she decided for herself that she wouldn't tolerate it anymore. All they had been doing for the past year was waiting on the mother-in-law while she was perfectly healthy, did nothing for herself like a young child. And her husband had also started treating his wife with contempt, clearly influenced by his mother. Well, now he can live with his mom. In the end, Michelle had an excellent vacation. She went to the beach and ate at an inexpensive cafe. It wasn't that expensive, and she felt human again. Meanwhile, her husband and mother-in-law rented a room from some peasants in the private sector and constantly quarreled with each other. There was no maid to cook for them either. Brian regretted wanting his mother to take care of him, accusing her of being the culprit of their predicament, while she objected, claiming it was his lazy, spoiled wife who was asking for nothing supernatural. For a while, Brian was angry with his wife. In reality, she had acted swinishly. Normal people don't do such things. Egged on by his mother, he even pondered divorce, but after floundering around, found no joy in it, only dissatisfaction, listening to his mom gripe while cafeteria food sat heavily in his stomach. And on the last day of vacation, he went to ask his wife for forgiveness. Seeing Michelle, he realized that spark, how beautiful she was, glowing as if refreshed. Not like him cursing the sea already and desperate to get home and reconcile with his wife, he says, "Forgive me for being a fool. You were right. We shouldn't scrimp on ourselves. You need a vacation too." His wife said she forgives him but doesn't want to live like they had been anymore. Choose either your mother or me. Michelle has no intention of living with her mother-in-law again. Everything had been normal for the couple before the mother came to live with them, and then the quarrels began, and their relationship deteriorated. Brian didn't even notice how sharply he began talking to his wife, since his mother was constantly breathing down his neck, criticizing the daughter-in-law. They didn't think she would move in with them. At first, she visited often, staying with them as if for a hospital visit. Young couples shouldn't refuse that. And then one day, the mother said it would be better if she lived with them while renting out her suburban apartment, explaining the health care was better here and she would help the young'uns out, seemingly hinting at some serious stomach issues, though she ate like a horse and they didn't reproach her for it. Well, they never did get that promised help. Linda was always rushing around to beauty salons and wandering shopping malls while the daughter-in-law was supposed to do all the work. The mother-in-law even counted the young couple's money but didn't contribute anything to their general budget herself, just taught them how they should manage their salaries better. The mother refused to move out, claiming the tenants in her apartment made that impossible. You can't kick people out in one day. Her son and daughter-in-law agreed to wait a couple of days. Michelle moved in with a friend, going out of principle. She wouldn't come home while her mother-in-law was still there. And Linda kept fobbing her son off with excuses until he finally cracked and called his sister, who he hadn't spoken to for a couple of years because of an argument. Luckily he did, because it turned out their mom had turned him against his sister, telling Brian that his sister wanted to take her housing from her and had practically dragged her off to see a notary, trying to get her to secretly sign over ownership of the apartment with barely a thing for her brother. She fed her son all kinds of tales that her daughter was violating her rights. Her son-in-law was abusive and wouldn't let her get a word in edgewise. Brian flat out refused to talk to his sister. But it turned out the same thing happened with his sister. Linda moved in to help with the kids, but instead would disappear somewhere, and no one knew where she was wandering around, didn't want to babysit the hyperactive, disobedient grandchildren, so she just lived off her daughter and son-in-law's back, making them feed her while helping with nothing, only talking behind her son-in-law's back and artfully stirring things up, so that her daughter began fighting with her husband, like her son later fought with his wife. She almost brought them to divorce by her actions. Luckily, her daughter realized what was happening in time and asked her to move out. Linda took offense but left, later telling her son about what a scoundrel his sister was for only wanting to get the apartment signed over to herself. She was kicked from one place and decided to ruin her son's life too, turning the siblings against each other and almost making them completely fall out. Maybe Linda didn't even realize what she was doing because she was used to living like this. But it's hard to believe. She was accustomed to attaching herself like a parasite to someone and doing nothing, only thinking of herself. First, she sat on her husband's back. Luckily, he was a hard-working man who doted on her hand and foot. She could just ride on him, but now he's died, and Linda started looking for someone new to latch onto, deciding her adult children should take care of her, and she started pestering them. She thought it was normal they should care for their mother, but no one could tolerate her for long. If only she wasn't so quarrelsome and just lived normally. But no, she sowed discord everywhere she went, sucking the life out of them like a parasite, thinking only of herself. Now, her son also realized they couldn't live together and gave her an ultimatum: Either she kicks out her tenants within 3 days, or he'll toss her out with her suitcase and she can go wherever she wants. She can come to visit them sometimes, but only on the condition that she doesn't talk nastily about anyone. That worked. She kicked out her tenants and sat in her apartment sulking at her children at first. Then she complained to the old biddies in her building about what awful kids she had, until one old lady told her to her face that she cursed her children to hell and back like a witch. Linda took offense at the neighbors too and stopped gossiping with them. She had to find a job because she had nothing to live on. Meanwhile, both her daughter and son had good lives. Luckily, both had strong families. Subscribe to our channel and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.